Hello and welcome to Clerkenford. Today we're going to be talking about stories and the oldest story we know of. And not only that, but we can look at how stories change, how that has affected the creation story in religion of Europe, and maybe more modern stories that have changed and how they change so quickly. So welcome to a story of stories and welcome to Clerkenford. So the oldest story known to man that we know of is called the Great Hunt. And in Europe, Northern Europe, the story goes something like this. Once upon a time, an elk awoke from hibernation, and as it woke, it caught the sun in its antlers. And then hunters chased the elk, and the elk ran across the sky. And the hunters chased it with their spears and their pots. And eventually they caught the elk in the winter, and it laid on the ground and they feasted. But the next spring the elk's offspring, his calf, awoke and the cycle continued. And that, in summary, is the story of the Great Hunt. So the story of the Great Hunt is told elsewhere in the world. It's told in Southern Europe, but it's told about deer because they don't have elk. So that's how a story can change in the environment. But it's also told in Siberia. And in Siberia they do have elk, but they're female elk, and the story is based around a female elk, like the mother. Their elk don't have antlers, so they actually use a mammoth, which may hint at the age of the story. But then academics also found out that the story is also told in North America. And in North America they use a bear, and the bear is killed in the autumn and its blood sprays across the land and changes all the leaves colours from green to red and brown. And so there we see the story with the same symbolism about hunters with pots and spears chasing an animal, repeated across the world, or certainly across Eurasia and North America. Similar stories exist in South America, but they may well be outliers and coincidental rather than actually stem from the same original story. So for the story to be in America, it must have crossed from the Eurasian sort of landmass. And the only way it could have done that is there was a land bridge. And the only times there's been a land bridge is in the last ice age, which was about 20,000 years ago. So it would make sense that the story came across at that time. And this could be sort of backed up in a way by the fact that the Siberians talk about mammoths, which were certainly quite abundant 20,000 years ago in Siberia. But then what else do we have to let us know where the story originated from and its age? Well, the story itself is actually about a constellation of stars, Ursa Major, that you may know it as the Plough or the Big Dipper or the Wagon or the Cart. It has many names. And the stars themselves, that we recognise, they're also minor stars about them, which are harder to see in our day and age because of light pollution. But they're the mini stars around them, we call them. They actually represent the spears and the pots. And because the spears and the pots are replicated in the stories, there is a lot of certainty that these stories are about the same constellation. Although there are some theories and evidence that some versions of the story actually use Orion's belt. But so we have that too. We also know that hunting was incredibly important, so a story about hunting would obviously resonate with humans at the time. And finally, most interestingly for me, what I thought was fascinating, was that if you're in the Northern Hemisphere today and you look at Ursa Major, like the Plough, it never dips below the horizon. But in the Northern European story, they talk about the elk lying on the ground, and actually the Siberian story, in the winter the mammoth hides in a river. Now if you actually go back 20,000 years plus, Ursa Major did actually dip onto the horizon. So this all links up to actually show that this story is at least 20,000 years old, probably 25, maybe 30,000 years. And so 30,000 years old is the oldest story we know today. So hopefully that allows you to understand how stories change in the environment around them. So different animals, different things happening in the sky. Yeah, our ancestors were very aware of those, far more than probably we are today. But that isn't the only story we know that has changed through time. So there are many, but the other big one you may be interested in is the story of creation, and the European story of creation. Now there's a video I've already done on the Vluspa, which is the Norse myth of creation. And that story goes something like this in summary. In the cosmos there was nothing, and then out of nothing a being was created called Ymir. And Ymir was both himself and his twin as one, and a giant cow. And Ymir suckled on the giant cow. From that he created energy that allowed him to create gods and beings. And some of those beings, who knows, Odin, Vili and V, his brothers, then got fed up of floating through the cosmos with Ymir, killed Ymir, and used his body to create more beings and the earth and the things around him. And Odin came to earth and is known as, you know, the major god in Norse mythology. And you may think that's quite a unique creation myth, but you may be somewhat familiar with maybe the Roman myth, where you have Romulus and Remus, who are twins, and they had a wolf who they suckled rather than a cow. Then Romulus killed Remus and Rome was created. Sounds very similar, doesn't it? And actually you have other myths going through Persia and Zoroastrianism into the Vedic culture in India that all have very similar themes, with a being that's sacrificed into two that then creates other creatures or gods, you know, a sky god, an ocean god, and even in Greece there's, you know, a form of that. And you actually create an evolutionary chart that almost certainly the Proto-Indo-Europeans had this creation myth that went to Germania and the north of Europe, and part of it into southern Europe and Italy, and then part of it over to the east through Persia into India, and then some of it travelled back again, certainly into Greece. It looks like Greece has taken some of that myth and evolved theirs. And then what we can tell from that is that there is an original creation myth where this stemmed from, because you can tell through language and how it's used and the shape of the stories, that these must have all evolved from a single source. And this Proto-Indo-European source, as we call it, the creation story would have gone something like this. Once upon a time in the cosmos there was nothing, and out of nothing two beings were created, man and his twin, Manus and Ymir, it would be known as, and a giant cow. Manus and Ymir suckled on the giant cow to get their energy, but were fed up of floating through the cosmos. So Manus killed Ymir, and through his body created the sky gods, the ocean gods, and the world on which we live. And he came down to the world as a priest figure, and then through ritual sacrifice allowed the world to be kept in order. And that, knowing that, has a huge significance on how we understand those creation stories. So what I've told you here is a real synopsis of them, a real summary. If you want to as you have the stories in detail as they're properly told, I can do that. So leave some comments below and like and subscribe to the channel if you're liking what you hear. But I'll tell you a few kickers, I guess you call them, modern day kickers, and then we'll apply those back, and it may question some of the things you've been told, or some people have been told. So first, there's the story of Halie Selassie. Halie Selassie was the Ethiopian emperor in the 1930s, and his people thought he was a divine person. He was prophesied from the Bible, and they worshipped him like a god almost, and also some worshipped him as a god. And he constantly denied this. He said, I'm not a god, I'm nowhere associated with religion, I'm not a divine being. He just refuted it. But his people still wanted to believe. And when he died, his people, let's say, worshipped him, and that in effect grew Rastafarianism from that. So in effect a religious entity formed from someone saying, I'm not a religious entity. And that's modern. And the other big story that those who aren't religious will be familiar with was one day a man walking through the United States, southwestern United States, came across some parts from a balloon that had been used to measure outcomes of nuclear testing. So they have these big balloons that go in the sky when bombs go off. They test, measure radiation and that. Found a couple of pieces of that and took it home, and from that 30-40 years later we have Roswell and aliens must exist. Again, modern day stuff where people get these stories and just exaggerate them or grow them or to their own ends change them. This is modern day, and even now people talk about fake news and things going on. It happens all the time. So if within a couple of generations in this modern time these things can happen, just think about, let's say, Christianity, for example. Jesus was born, died, let's say 35 AD. By 70, 80, 90 AD, then the Gospels were written. Same amount of time after, but with no internet and no sort of newspapers. So ask yourself, how do we know those Gospels are true? How do we know Jesus was real? Is Jesus historical fact, or is he a mythical being? And I will do a video on that at some point because it's rather interesting. So there you have it. Stories about stories and how stories change, and what you believe may actually not really be the whole truth. It's almost certainly been moulded and shaped to meet expectations either of you or the storyteller. So I hope you enjoyed that little journey, and say like and subscribe to the video if it's something you want to hear more of. Leave some comments if you want to know more about any of the particular subjects, and I can go to them in proper detail with, so rather than summarise it and miss out lots of facts. And I hope to speak to you soon. So stay safe, stay well, and this was Queckenford.